We have Barton Drake here with me today. There's going to be a unique episode because we're talking to somebody who's in architecture and very large projects by the sounds of it. And it sounds like there was a recent merger and you got quite the divisions within your company now. Can you break that down, what you focus on?
Absolutely. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about the company. So HED is a national practice, architectural engineering professional practice where we provide integrated services to our clients across the country. I was with a smaller regional practice here in Texas for about 33 or so years. A little over 2.5 years ago, we merged with HED. So I've had a great blessing at this phase of my career to have a completely new experience, which I'm totally really enjoying and getting to meet a lot of really great talented people. So we're about 400 people strong, both architects and engineers, originally founded in Detroit, Michigan, 1908. So we're one of the oldest architectural engineering practices in the country, which is another thing that's brought a lot of real interest and experience to me at this stage of my career. And we serve multiple sectors around the country. So we have experts in each sector and leaders in each sector so we can serve our clients across the country. Just a few of those sectors, just so everybody understands what we do. We're in the healthcare sector. We're in the uh, manufacturing and science sector. We're in the higher education sector. We're in the K-12 sector. We're in the workplace sector. We also serve the government sector and housing and mixed use. And then my sector is community, where we focus primarily on municipal governments and cities and counties and things around those areas.
Yeah, you must have a very sizable team to cover so much ground.
Yeah, so the sectors are broken up and there's a sector leader for each one. And then I have in my sector anywhere from 15 to 25 people, just depending on workload. Now, we also can tap expertise across sectors, right? So it's really a very dynamic process, which I think provides a lot more depth and I guess quality to the kind of services we can bring. For example, I'll tell you, I'm currently working on a very interesting project for a growing city just north of Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex called Celina, Texas. They've grown by 60 plus percent growth rate over the last few years. So there's a significant growth. And we're doing a new government center slash library for them in their downtown area. And in order to put together a team, I have individuals working from the San Francisco office, the LA office, our Detroit office, our Chicago office, and our Dallas office. And one of the things I was able to do because of this sector based structure is I pull one of the really talented, young, energetic workplace designers who works in LA, part of my team here to work on the planning for this government center. We're designing workplaces for people. So it's given me an opportunity to capture young talent from around the country and bring it to my clients here locally.
Mhm. You know, one of the things that you mentioned before we hit record is this ability to bridge that community and history of that area and the future of that we're looking at. Could you talk a little bit about how you bridge those gaps and what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, you certainly need to understand the history of the city. You have to understand the values of the leadership and what the community's expectations are as you develop their city, right? And particularly a small town like this, late 19th century developments, small brick buildings. There's a certain attitude that we're a small town and we want to keep up our value system, the way we think about coming together as a community. So you have to understand that perspective, a real deep dive and try to understand all the infrastructure. We look at growth rates. We look at, what facilities do they have? What are the important historical elements of that town? And then how do we bring all that together in terms of planning, capitalize, I guess, historically on the growth and the value systems and what kind of built the city and then how can we best integrate that into a new plan as we think about how we're going to evolve over time, capture the best value for the amenities that they already have and the things that are meaningful to them that they want to preserve, enhance, and celebrate. And so this building that I mentioned earlier in Celina, the government center, it's a little over 105,000 square feet, and it's right adjacent to the town square. So there's a real important, the value of the town square to the community is significant. They have, as you know, as many towns do, they have important community events throughout the year where they come and they celebrate together. Families come, they have food trucks and canopies, and they may have artisans and artists and things going on throughout the year. And so we have to be thoughtful about how we integrate in that environment. Our building is right up against the edge, and we had to think carefully about was its late 19th century, 20th century development brick building. So we had to be thoughtful about the scale and how we wanted to bring this 100,000 square foot building into that town. That's a major addition and really impacts the scale and the quality of that environment. So we had a lot of conversations with the city and wanted to make sure we were thoughtful about that. We had to get a certain amount of function into the building to serve the growing community. We had government facilities scattered around town in different locations, not ideal for operations, right? You want to bring those folks together so they could be in the same building, can have conferences together and do the things that they need to do to serve the community. So as we were planning that, we realized that all the needs, including a library, which was a part of that first phase, because their current library was just a couple thousand square feet, woefully under serving community. So once we kind of went through that process of planning and designing, we realized we needed a significant size building, and we didn't want to overwhelm the community. So we actually put a basement in the building so that we could fit all of the uses that we needed and not overwhelm the scale of the town. And then on top of that, we have a roof garden so we could pack even more activities, public community activities into that building and hold that scale down. So that's part of that, being very careful about what that community's value systems are, how it can be thoughtful and respectful about what we do for them.
Yeah, this sounds very different from what I've just, anecdotally experienced. You go into some areas, I live in a rural area, smaller town, and they're building a new building, and it frankly is just a cookie cutter, plop it in the middle of the city, and it just doesn't have the same look and feel as the rest of the town. And you're kind of taking that very different approach.
Absolutely. And I think that's, to me, the great thing about thoughtful design, right? I've been fortunate to spend most of my career working across many, many building types with many different clients over the years. And you're right. You see a lot of people that they're really primarily crunching numbers for a bottom line. And it's driven by economics and mathematics and less uh, about necessarily about culture and about really integrating and being a good neighbor, right? A good community member, right? I mean, I think of architecture, if it's done right, it certainly should be able to come into a community, make a major impact, but in a thoughtful, careful way where you're really looking at today. You're thoughtful about yesterday, but you have to address today, but you also have to be very careful about the future, right? You really,
Mhm.
if you want to be careful with your clients' funds, you want to serve their needs efficiently in the present and into the future. And then you have to anticipate change to some degree, right? Because and just think about what we've experienced in our lives just in the last 25, 30 years. When I began in architecture, there were no computers. Everything we did was by hand on a board where you take the piece of paper down, you do with pencils, and erasers. People look at you today, they would laugh. You really don't see drafting tables much more in the
Mhm.
architectural engineering profession. They're kind of an antique item of the past, right? COVID's impact in the way that we do things now, as you know, I mean, I spend our practice now is driven so much by technology and is spread out across the country. We probably at any given day have 15 to 20% of the total staff sitting in the same building at the same time doing work together, right? I mean, as I mentioned before, on the design team that I'm working with on this Celina Government Center project, I have folks all over the country and it's working beautifully. So I have to say, we've adapted.
It seems like everybody has had to adapt to that new environment.
Indeed, we have, haven't we? Yeah, it's been an interesting journey since COVID.
You had mentioned that you've been doing this before computers were a prominent thing in this working environment. Could you talk a little bit about the building material and some of those things that what type of efficiencies and evolution have you seen over your time?
I think probably the biggest, I still work in concrete and steel and brick and mortar, stone and glass, all of those things are still there. Now we have integrated technology with fabrication now, so we have a lot more accuracy. I think the biggest thing about the evolution of materials, we have so much more flexibility now with computer generated design integrated in with fabrication and manufacturing. So it allows a lot more very fine detail and a lot more flexibility. And I think those systems now make our buildings so much more efficient because now we have the technology and the capability to do the building envelope and to manage it with design software where we can put the building exactly on the part of the globe that we want to design the building at, and we can orient it exactly right to the sun with the curvature of the planet and the angles of the sun as they evolve throughout the year, through the seasons. And you can design the envelope so it is idealized, maximized for the relationship of solar heat gain to your building envelope. I mean, that's to me huge. People figured that out, millennia ago, right? In the very early days, how to relate to the sun. So, it's kind of been one of those design elements that man figured out many years ago, but now we've got the ability to take to such a high level of refinement. Because as you know, if you want to operate a building for 50 to 100 years, depending on the lifespan of the building, that energy cost per year is a significant investment for the building users.
Mhm.
So I think that's from an engineering materials design standpoint, the merging of sophisticated technology and science with what we do in design is a really major part of our profession.
Just to remind everybody, head over to head.design and learn a little bit more about what the team is doing there. Again, it's head.design. So, with all of that, you mentioned that the building lasting, 50 to 100 years. Some is that common? Like, it's kind of surprising. I've gotten to the age now where I go around my town. I remember a building going up when I was really small and they're tearing it down already. It's just like, what happened here?
Well, I guess it should be that way, right? I mean, and to me, overall philosophy of sustainability and I guess the thoughtful, wise application of our resources, right? Our worldly resources. We should be thinking about things with a minimum of 50-year lifespan. And really, you can do longer with good design and proper planning. A lot of times it's that front end and budget that drives the approach that some clients take to building buildings. Now, I work in the public sector quite a bit. So public sector people really think about that investment and how they're going to maintain it because they may have 5 million square feet of built space that they have to deal with on a, annual basis for a larger city, obviously. So you think about it from that perspective. I think it's the right perspective to think about it, right? We tend to be a throwaway culture these days, much more than we should be. So That's kind of the terms that we talk in most of the sectors that I work for. We want to look at a 50-year building. In some cases, they're thinking 75 plus and beyond. Now, you're going to have cycles of repair and refresh depending on quality of the work and the materials you select. You do the planning. But absolutely. Thoughtful clients that want to do sustainable work, that's a good approach, would look to that 50 plus year lifespan for building.
I'm sure you have to do a lot of planning around growth and everything as well, placing the initial building somewhere that it can expand if need be as the community continues to grow.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times we're carefully engaged in master planning. So a client may come to us and say, "Hey, Barton, we've got, 15 acres over here. And initially we have a need for maybe 2 or 3 of those acres, but we'd like to visualize how that might evolve over time." So we want to look at it as a phased approach to expansion. And we have some goals about kind of environment we want. I mean, do we have an attitude about a campus architectural vision that we may want to start with the building of this particular architectural language? We don't know all of the uses, but we know it wants to be a government center and we want to think about it thoughtfully and carefully and how it might evolve over time. And that way we can think about the first phase, taking up a certain footprint and thinking about common space, adjacent space next to it. Where are the utilities coming long term? You really get a chance to holistically think about how it's going to evolve over the first 5 years, then the next 5 years, and maybe the next 10 years. And you begin to think about it as a complex or a little mini campus that would serve a specific client or community.
I'm wondering, is there anything, building trends or anything that has surprised you over the past 10 years or so that has caught a foothold that you wouldn't have expected?
I think a lot of my public clients are even more conscious now about thinking about sustainability and how we can plan a building that we're going to invest $700 a square foot on today that would cost us $1,000 a square foot to build in 10 years or less, given the current market, right?
Mhm.
I think there's a lot more of that now. They really want to be extremely thoughtful about sustainable design. How are we applying materials? How are we using energy? Are we providing spaces that have adaptability and flexibility so that we need to think about column grids for the structure so it provides a lot of flexibility? What are we going to do for floor to floor heights? For example, on the Celina building that we're working on now, the government center for Celina, it's a library and a government center, but it's intended to be ultimately a library for the complete build out. So a lot of our conversation in the urban planning was, okay, we know it's going to be a library and it might be 5 years, it may be 10 years. It depends on growth, right? So this building is intended to serve as both a library and a government center for 5 to 10 years, but we know it's ultimately going to be a library. So everything that we're doing now, the way we organize the mechanical systems, where we put the vertical elements that are fixed and can't move, elevator, cores, stair towers, we're thoughtful about how it relates as a library when it's going to be 10 years down the road, but we also have to make it work today.
Mhm.
But we don't want to have to spend a lot of money tearing things out in the future when it becomes a library. So we've done that careful planning up front. And we've also thought about the mechanical systems, and the floor heights are different because in a library, you need a taller floor than you might need in just a typical administrative building. So we've designed it for a library, but it's going to be a beautiful mixed building initially. And we're using something a little different, thinking about that flexibility component I mentioned earlier, where we're using an underfloor air system. So essentially, it's air pushed under the floor to lower volume, which is more energy efficient because it takes smaller fan motors to drive the energy to push the air. And then you have the floor registers in the floor. So you have a panel system. You can just move the floor registers around as you reconfigure the building and you don't have to tear out ducts and rework ductwork. So that's part of that whole conceptualizing for the future, conceptualizing for change, knowing that the changes. In this case, we know exactly what the change is. In fact, if it wanted to be something other than a library, absolutely could. We could still change our mind and make it something else. But that system gives you really total flexibility because all your infrastructure is running there as well. So you can relocate technology and power and things in the floor system. You don't have it all overhead, which I think is very interesting.
The other thing is that you're kind of a unique position to answer this, and it's kind of related in the fact that have you seen any techniques or trends that seem to spill over from like the residential area into what you're doing or vice versa, where things start to bleed over into each other for the benefit of both?
Yeah, I think cross pollination of ideas, absolutely. I haven't done a lot of housing and residential in my late career. I mean, I did when I was a much younger person, did some apartment projects. And even before I became an architect, I was a carpenter and I actually built housing back in the day. But generally speaking, I think the sectors look to each other to find good ideas and we borrow good ideas across the way. In fact, I think the floor system I'm speaking of was originally conceived in more of a clean environment where they had a lot of different controls and flexibility built into that. So I do think we're always looking uh, for good ideas wherever they may be and cross pollinating other sectors.
Circling back on the computers, AI is becoming a big buzzword and word in everybody's industry. Where do you see that going in yours?
We've established a division within the company now to study that very thing. I think we see it as having a huge impact on our profession. So we're trying to get out ahead of it and look for ways that we can begin to integrate it in small ways. I mean, we're already using it in documenting our meetings. Actually, we're doing a video for the Celina project where we've integrated drone technology in with the 3D computer modeling and rendering. And then we initially used AI to design some music for the video that we're doing. So we're looking at it. I'm taking meeting notes from a lot of our meetings so that we can get that documented in real time as it goes. We're creating music. We're using it in some cases to help us get a start on drafting a thought paper in a particular subject matter that we may be interested in. We're looking at ways that can help us integrate perhaps communicating from the written specifications in a document and make sure those are communicating with the drawings so that you get that integration of the written specifications for all of the technical aspects of defining all of the systems in a building, integrated with the drawings, three-dimensional model, and then making that information smart and tied together. I can see a day in the next generation or so where AI could help us do some preliminary conceptual studies for somebody very quickly. So it'll improve the productivity and the efficiency of the way we can bring design to our clients. We'll have to just spread out to the kinds of services that I think we can bring to our clients because less time will have to be focused on certain aspects of design if we have the benefit of AI kind of jumpstarting some of those early conceptual ideas, right? I mean, I think
Mhm.
to me, it's fascinating. There's just infinite possibilities yet to be realized. And I think we recognize that it's going to be a huge part of our profession. We want to, get that up.
Well, Barton, this has been a fantastic conversation. Before we jump into the rapid fire questions, is there a question or concept you think we should have covered here today?
I think you gave me a great opportunity. I hope that this has been a little different perspective, perhaps. Although I'm guessing that a lot of the folks in your real estate world deal with architects, obviously, if
Hmm.
they're real estate and doing all kinds of things. So hopefully, I think your audience got a sense of some of the things we do at HED and the kind of diversity of our practice and how we can help across. I think you did a good job. I hope that others agree.
Well, just to remind everybody one more time, hed.design, and that's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. But if you're ready, we'll jump into a couple of the rapid fire questions.
Absolutely.
What lie do business owners sometimes tell themselves?
Sometimes they tell themselves, I think that they can do a lot more than they can do. I think you have to realize it takes, I always believe that the smart business owners realizes that power of the team, the wisdom of the team coming together to share ideas is always infinitely better than any individual. So I think a really wise business leader understands that they're only as good as their team. And they're smart enough to step back and take that humble perspective. Surround yourself with people smarter than yourself, maybe more energetic than yourself. And I think you'll be a successful business person and don't kid yourself that you can do it alone. And that
If you could,
you know all that you need to know.
sure. If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I guess I think if I went back to give my younger self a piece of advice today, I would say spend more time looking outside of just your professional world. I think what I've learned over time is the more I back off and I just get out of my bubble and I look around and try to understand what other people are doing. What are the things that motivate and affect other people? If I'd have spent more time looking around doing that, I think it would have made me a wiser, more productive person sooner. I don't think I figured out quite as early as I wish I would have as I look back now.
That's a really good point because real estate investors, realtors, in this bubble, we have a tendency of kind of stagnating and nothing is being pushed forward. Everybody is 20 years behind. Taking a minute and learning what other people are doing in other industries is just one of the best investments a person can make.
Well, I think it ties into what we were talking about earlier, right? Is when you borrow and cross collaborate, you go, you know what? I haven't ever thought of it that way, but the way you're doing it actually applies really well to the way I could do it. And I'm going to rethink an approach. I mean, sometimes you stumble into things and you just make those connections you don't always make if you don't get out of your bubble.
Mhm.
Like real estate, architecture, there's a lot to keep up with, right? There's a lot to learn, but I just do think sometimes you just cross pollinate and learn from others and other professions, and other worlds of existence.
Sure. What single strategy, process, or tool have you implemented that had the biggest time-saving impact to you or your business?
I think for me right now, because the whole process of design is what we do in our profession, right? And since the merger, we started using a software called Concept Board. And Concept Board is basically infinite white space on the computer in the cloud where we can all come together, share ideas. We can download digital information. We can put photographs, images, text, all this information that we're working with together as a team. That's the owner, the architect, the design team, I should say, and the general contractor, and whatever other participants in the team are there. We can store all this information together in real time and have access to it together over the whole course of the project. So, when we're brainstorming ideas, it just gives us a great opportunity to share ideas in real time. And then is the process, it's a linear process, but it's also iterative, right? You come back and you check ideas and you build on those things. So we've had the opportunity to go week by week, meeting by meeting, and keep a running tab of all these conversations and the documentation, the ideas as they evolve, and then we can revisit them. We can revisit our notes. We may have notes in real time. So as a computer tool, it's just become an incredibly valuable way to share design and to keep a record of it as it evolves over the course, anywhere from 12 months to 16 to 18 months of design that you may go through on a given project. really invaluable tool for our profession that I really enjoy using with the team.
Well, that sounds awesome. One last time, it is head.design. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time, Barton. I hope you'll consider coming back again sometime.
I'd love to talk anytime. Thank you so much for the opportunity.